Great. Okay, we now move, oh, wait a second. We're not going to be voting on this. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this item? Please come forward. You have up to 1 minute, and you can give supporting documentation if you wish. You can use the mics on the ends.
Hi, Laura Szabo-Kubitz at the Institute for College Access and Success. I want to thank subcommittee members for recognizing that college affordability remains a substantial challenge for low and truly middle-income Californians and colleges across the state, and for the recommendation to deepen investment in the Cal Grant program. As important as the Cal Grant program is, there aren't nearly enough Cal Grants to go around, and the grants for the lowest income students hold just a fraction of their original purchasing power. That's why TICAS and more than a dozen other groups recommend increasing the number of competitive Cal Grants available and increasing the Cal Grant B Access Award to help the lowest income students cover non-tuition costs. These are the two most effective financial aid investments the state can make to promote student access, affordability, and success, and do so for students across all types of colleges. The state cannot get ahead by leaving low-income students behind. Thank you for your consideration and for your leadership.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Sarah Arce on behalf of the Campaign for College Opportunity. I'd just like to echo TICAS's comments. The campaign strongly supports and encourages the committee to prioritize increasing the number of annually authorized competitive awards and increasing the Cal Grant B Access Award. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Erica Romero on behalf of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. We want to thank you for rejecting the governor's cut to the nonprofit institutions. Those institutions educate as many Latinos as the UC, and they do a very good job of graduating those students, so it's incredibly important that we keep the award at the same level, and as well increasing the competitive awards. We know there aren't nearly enough, so thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Veronica Villalobos with the Independent Colleges Association. Just want to thank the committee and the staff for its recommendation to reject the 11% cut that's in statute and really protect access for the 9,000 incoming freshmen and transfers that we're expected to serve through the Cal Grant program. These are all California students, low income, so we appreciate your action. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move to issue number 7, the UC funding package. Department of Finance.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll talk first about what we proposed in the May revision and then make some very short comments about the package you're considering later. So as you're aware, the governor and the UC president reached an agreement by which the UC president will undertake a number of reforms to manage its operations more effectively and will recommend additional reforms to the Academic Senate. First, I'll describe the funds that are included in the May revision proposal. As proposed in January, the administration continues to propose $119 million in additional general fund for the university, as well as $25 million in one-time general fund that would be used exclusively for deferred maintenance. The May revision also includes $25 million in one-time cap and trade revenues that would be used for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. The multi-year plan would continue for the next 2 years, by which the administration would continue to provide 4% increases in general fund support to the university. With these additional state resources, the university is committed to holding tuition for California undergraduate resident students flat for the 15-16 and the 16-17 fiscal years. The agreement makes significant reforms in a number of areas that have been long-standing concerns for the governor and the legislature, and I'll describe a few of those. The first is related to transfer from the community colleges. Over the next 2 years, the UC will articulate specific pathways for transfer for the 20 majors that are closely aligned to the associate degrees for transfer established by the community colleges and CSU pursuant to SB 1440. Any differences will be clearly identified so that students know exactly what is needed for transfer to both UC and CSU campuses. Furthermore, UC already has a goal of a 2-to-1 ratio of incoming freshmen to transfer students, though only 3 campuses currently meet this expectation. The Office of the President has made a commitment to reach the 2-to-1 ratio by 2017-18 for all undergraduate campuses, excluding UC Merced. We think these are important reforms that will open up transfer opportunities to thousands of additional students in the coming years. The second area is related to policies that impact the time it takes students to complete degrees. And I'll run through a number of reforms. By March 1st, 2016, each campus will develop pathways that allow students to graduate within 3 years. And the UC is committed to encouraging these pathways with a goal that at least 5% of students will access them by the summer of 2017. By the summer session of 2016, 3 campuses will pilot alternative pricing models for summer session. Our goal here and the UC's shared goal is to encourage more undergraduate students to complete more courses during the summer, thereby reducing the time it takes them to complete their degree. By July 1st of 2017, all undergraduate campuses will review the courses necessary in 3/4 of their majors to reduce the number of units required to no more than 45 units where that's possible. And this is modeled after a successful effort that was already completed at UCLA. And finally, the president will encourage the Academic Senate to review existing policies on credits for AP courses and for college-level examination program tests, as well as the use of the Common Identification Numbering System that's already in place for the CSU. And the idea here is to allow students to better count courses and credits that they earned in other contexts at other institutions toward their UC degrees. We think these policy changes can have a significant impact if the students receive appropriate guidance as they move through the programs, and the Office of the President is committed to working with the campuses to help advise students to stay on track to graduation within 4 years. The third area of commitments in this agreement is for the university to better become a laboratory for teaching and learning through better use of technology and data. All campuses will begin to report on how they're using data and technology tools to identify students at risk of repeating courses, not completing on time, or needing advising or other interventions. UC Riverside will pilot activity-based costing. It's a tool that allows the university to better understand the cost of a particular course so that we can better understand the cost of degree programs and undergraduate education in general. Riverside will pilot that for its College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences, which is about 20 departments, and 2 additional campuses will participate on a smaller scale. UC Davis will lead a multi-campus pilot with at least 2 other campuses on adaptive learning, which is a use of technology to better identify what the particular challenges a student faces, and then respond accordingly with more personalized instruction for that student. And the Office of the President will convene a group to better understand which master's and certificate programs would meet workforce needs. And the final set of commitments relates to the university's long-term retirement liabilities, which I think we've discussed previously. Under PEPRA, the state's Pension Reform Act, the state imposed a cap on pensionable earnings of $117,000 for employees who are eligible for Social Security benefits. Under current UC policy, there's a higher limit for the UC's pension plan. It's $265,000. And so by July 1st, 2016, UC will adopt a pension plan that includes a cap on pensionable earnings consistent with the state's pension reform law. In doing so, the administration has committed to providing Proposition 2 funds to pay down the university's existing pension liabilities. The state would provide $96 million in 15-16, with roughly $170 million in each of the next 2 years. And I'll close by going through the items in your package and the Senate's package. We would be opposed to the additional funding in the earmark for the University of California labor centers. Our approach has been to provide discretionary funding and to allow the regents to make decisions about how they would use the funding. And we wouldn't have any position on the 2 issues related to non-resident supplemental tuition and on the issue related to repurposing the financial aid received, financial aid received by non-resident students and spent on non-resident students. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
So the governor's okay with all that money going to non-resident students, financial aid money?
I think I wouldn't say he's okay. I think it's outside of the scope of the agreement that we've reached with the University of California on how to move forward at the May revision.
So then your comment is you have no position on it?
No position, yes.
Okay. Elio?
So as you heard, the governor is extending his multi-year funding plan for UC by 2 years. And so in 15-16 and 16-17, the plan includes a 4% state increase in flat tuition. In contrast, in the 2 out years, 17-18 and 18-19, it's a 4% state increase as well as a tuition increase. And I think one concern is, in terms of thinking long-term, is why the university would need more funding 2 years from now versus today under the governor's plan. And so we'd continue to recommend that you not commit to these sort of out-year increases several years from now. Regarding the specific proposals that the governor has in the May revision, we think that all of the operational changes that the Department of Finance just listed generally are in accordance with what a lot of higher education experts suggest to improve student success and reduce institutional costs. We think there's a lot of good ideas in there. The governor expects UC to report back on what they're doing on these various initiatives, and we would just recommend that you formalize this reporting requirement in a supplemental report language to the budget. We'd also recommend that you have a similar reporting requirement for CSU, since a lot of these initiatives also could be applied to the Cal State University. So you might want to ask them to report back on whether they're doing any of these strategies and what their plan is. Regarding the Proposition 2 funding, we would just note that you have various options in terms of how you spend your Proposition 2 funds. There's, in addition to the University of California retirement plan, there's various other state-level retirement liabilities, such as for CalPERS for state employees, for CalSTRS, which is for teachers, for judges' retirement. And so our recommendation for you was to take a long-term view of these funds, since you're going to have to be providing them in the future as well. Figure out which retirement plan you would get the most sort of bang for your buck in terms of funding, and then target the funding to those plans. And in terms of the governor's proposal to require UC to implement a cap on pensionable compensation consistent with the state's PEPRA law, we would just note, while it might be reasonable to expect UC to have the same cap as employees covered under PEPRA, oftentimes, well, I guess first we would note that this would generate only savings in the very, very long term, since it would only apply to new employees. So the savings would be quite small in the near term. And in addition, anytime pension benefits are changed, there's the possibility there could be other forms of compensation offered employees, since they're having their pension benefit reduced, that might erode the long-term savings. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Now move to the UC for your response.
Good afternoon, Chair Block and members of the subcommittee. My name is Nathan Brostrom. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the University of California System, and greatly appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, discuss the impact of the governor's May revision on the university and all of our stakeholders, including staff, faculty, and our students. May revision has many positive features for the university and our students. I'm not going to go into detail. I think Christian did a very good job of describing some of those. I would just make a couple of comments. First, I want to spend a moment on pension funding. The one-time infusion of Prop 2 monies is valuable to the UC. We have an unfunded liability in our pension of $7.6 billion on an actuarial basis, on a market basis, $12.4 billion on an actuarial basis. The monies in Prop 2 are required to supplement, not supplant, our current efforts to address unfunded liability. So by the wording in the initiative, these monies must be used to pay down liabilities above the contribution level that's been set by the regents, our governing body. We have a 14% employer contribution, so this really represents the delta between our funding policy and the employer contribution level for state-funded employees. As such, these funds will help strengthen our retirement system. Ultimately, they'll enable us to reduce the employer contributions out of our operating budget, but they will not immediately free up money in the university's operating budget that could be used for other purposes. We are very supportive of the budget proposals that would invest new general funds for enrollment growth at the community colleges and the Cal State system. We would like to partner with the legislature to achieve the same funding support for UC enrollment growth. Our campuses have identified the capacity to serve over 10,000 new students over the next 4 years, including a sizable influx of new transfer students, as Christian described earlier, in our goal to meet the 2-to-1 ratio on all of our campuses. However, we need permanent general fund dollars to support this growth. In particular, if the budget were to provide $50 million in new permanent funding over the next 2 years, each of the next 2 years, we'd be able to add the 10,000 students over the next 4 years. Demand for UC education continues to grow, and it will only increase with the additional funds provided to our high schools and community colleges. However, we need permanent funding to adequately support these students when they're on our campuses. Again, we are supportive of the framework set forth by the governor in the May revision, and we ask the legislature for its support of the framework. We would also respectfully ask that you consider adding permanent funding to the UC budget, similar to what has been added for community colleges in the Cal State system to grow enrollment at the university. With that, Chair Block, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Mr. Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You commented on the pension plan and the kind of the minimal benefits because this is applying to new employees. Wouldn't PEPRA have applied to the UC system anyway?
No, PEPRA didn't apply to UC.
Why not?
We have our own independent retirement system that was started in 1962.
So it just applies to CalPERS, CalSTRS, and CERL plans and not to the university systems? And
It applies to Cal State. They're part of
community
CalPERS.
colleges. Yeah,
you're just exempted.
that's right.
Okay, okay. For
But
some reason.
we did do pension reform prior to the state. We undertook it in 2009, and we did change the and put in a new tier that went into effect in 2013. It's very, very similar to what the state did under PEPRA. Probably the only major difference is on the pensionable income limit.
Okay, no, that helps. That kind of clarifies this. I'm kind of thinking, what did we really negotiate here if it was going to happen anyway? So we didn't do a net present value study, or we're giving 96 million and 107 twice. We say, okay, well, at the end of the day, we came out ahead or we didn't. How did you come up with those numbers, and what was the exchange back and forth?
Let's go UC first.
Yeah, I can tell you because I was part of coming up with those. What we did is we looked at our funding policy. So our funding policy takes the normal cost, that is what we need to put in every year just to stay even, to tread water. And then 1/3 of the unfunded liability, 1/30th, 30-year amortization period, and looked at that over the next 3 years. What was that amount that we needed to do? Then roughly 30% of our employees are on what we call general funds, either state funds or tuition. The rest are supported by our medical centers, contracts and grants, auxiliaries like housing and dining. And so we calculated what that amount would be. We will take care of the other 2/3, but for that 1/3, that's where the governor agreed to fund that. Again, it's above and beyond what we would have been contributing anyway. And so this will help us with the unfunded portion of our liability. Doesn't really go to what we're already putting into the pension system.
Okay, after 3 years, what do we do for an encore?
Well, we still won't be at full funding. The full funding.
No, you're at 7.6 billion. This is spit.
Yeah, but it does help us a lot. We're at 87% funded right now, and we have been doing some other things, including internal borrowing ourselves to strengthen that. But it will help us get towards full funding, accelerate our growth towards full funding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morlock. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we'll move to public comment on this issue. Any members of the public wish to comment? Please come to the side mics. You all can stay here.
Erica Romero on behalf of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. The University of California now has 4 federally designated Hispanic serving institutions with a 5th on the way. So to the extent that there is funding for additional students, that would be great for the students of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Morlock.
Just now that I've got you, just 2 quick questions. The defined contribution plan, how's that going to be structured? You're going to to
Yeah.
be competitive and attractive?
Well, it's a very good question. We're just starting the design. The president's going to create a work group, but we to date have only had a defined benefit plan. And many of our employees, including those at the medical centers, have asked for a defined contribution plan to have greater portability and greater flexibility. So we're going to have a work group that looks at the design, but what we'll probably have is, if you come in as a new employee, you'll have a choice of either this defined benefit plan with pepper cap or a defined contribution plan that will also probably be graduated to be competitive for longer serving employees.
Okay, and then you mentioned internal borrowing. What does that mean?
So when we first hit when I first came over to the office of the president, the then president created a work group on post-employment benefits because for a long time we had not funded it. We were well overfunded, and then because of the two market crashes and no contributions, we were quickly falling into unfunded status. We took three major actions. One is we introduced a new tier to the regions, which they adopted. That was the one I described earlier, very similar to the state's tier. We dramatically increased contributions, and we went from 0 in 2009 to right now 14%. So it's about $1.4 billion that we currently pay. And again, I would note that this is something the state pays for Cal State and community colleges that we currently pay ourselves. And then we did some internal borrowing. We have liquidity, a short-term investment pool that we have to keep. We have to keep a fair number of liquid assets, especially because of our medical centers. But we had what I would say were excess liquidity. And so we've lent those to the pension fund. Those funds are earning about 1.5%. We expect the pension fund to earn 7.5% year in, year out. And so that was excess returns that helped strengthen the system. And that has worked out pretty well. It's not a lot. It's $2.7 billion on a total asset base of $60 billion, but it has helped us shore it up.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thank you. We'll now move to issue number 8, the CSU budget package.
But, Marty, is there an opportunity to just make a comment? Okay, I just say that I agree with the idea of, the dream of permanent funding for the UC. I think it'd be a great thing.
Thank you. Issue number 8, Department of Finance, CSU budget package.
Thank you. As we discussed previously, the governor's budget proposed $119 million ongoing for the CSU, along with $25 million general fund on a one-time basis for deferred maintenance at CSU campuses. As I think we would want to note, the CSU has made two important announcements over the spring. The first was that it would not raise tuition in 15-16, which we believe is an important decision to preserve access to a CSU education for more students. The second, the CSU Chancellor's Office recently reported on a number of initiatives already underway at CSU campuses to manage its operations more efficiently and to generate savings. We believe that these savings, as part of the plan, should be redirected towards higher priorities. The CSU indicated to us that it would use the funds proposed in the governor's budget for the following purposes: to fund its existing obligations like increased costs for pensions and health benefits, to increase employee compensation system-wide by 2%, to support the costs of enrollment of about 4,000 additional students, and to address backlogs in critical maintenance and infrastructure. The May revision includes an additional $38 million general fund ongoing for the CSU. With these additional resources, the administration expects the university first to improve efforts to improve student success as approved by the trustees. You heard previously in great detail about the CSU's graduation initiative, which set goals for the year 2025, including a 4-year rate for freshmen of about 24% and a 2-year rate for transfer students of 35%. The CSU is going to report publicly on its progress, but we expect them to evaluate whether they can exceed these targets and timelines. And we'd note that over the long term, reducing the time it takes students to complete degrees should provide access for a significant number of new students. Second, we think that these funds will allow the CSU to enroll more transfer students beginning in the budget year in the spring of 2016. So we expect that they would enroll at least 1,500 more transfer students by that spring term. I'd note 2 other adjustments. Yesterday, you talked about the pilot program with the community college to offer basic skills instruction, which we think that would have allowed CSU to redirect resources to continuing improvements on time to degree. And then finally, the May revision proposes $35 million in Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund cap and trade revenues for energy projects at CSU campuses. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. LAO.
Jason Constanturos, LEO, and advising you on budgeting for CSU as well as UC. We've made two broad recommendations. The first is that you designate how you want the funds that you appropriate to CSU be spent so that you get to determine your own priorities for the university. And secondly, we recommend that you first start with sort of a workload budget and then determine your priorities from there. And the traditional workload budget for CSU has historically been adjusting for inflation and enrollment growth. Given inflation estimates for 2015-16, we estimate a COLA for CSU would now be about $72 million. Enrollment growth has been a little bit trickier. It's been tricky to determine which students are now eligible under master plan guidelines. You'll have an opportunity to hear about that more in a following item on the eligibility study. But we've recommended that you, grow enrollment based on their fall admissions decisions. That would add about 4,000 students. As Mr. Osmenya noted, we estimate that would be about $24 million. And then any additional funding on top of that, we have a couple of suggestions about how you might consider spending that funding. For example, you might identify some high priority one-time uses for funding, recognizing that the state budget tends to be, unpredictable in future years. We think one really good case for CSU would be deferred maintenance. We've seen a couple of different estimates for their deferred maintenance backlog, but we think it's reasonable to assume it's at least in the hundreds of millions of dollars and tends to be one time in use. So we think that's a good place to consider additional funds. So with that, I'm glad to answer any other questions.
Thank you. CSU.
So Ryan Storm with CSU again. We began our development of our budget request back in November of 14, and we laid out a whole host of items that we believe were critical to the university. Some of those were obviously new funded enrollments in order to meet future workforce demands, also to provide student services and courses that our students badly need, and other incentives and other items that actually get us across the line in terms of making significant movements on the budget. And what I see before us today in front of this committee is a plan that absolutely marries with that request. So we greatly appreciate the fact that the Senate has listened to that request, added in other elements to your plan that I think exacerbate and make this a much better plan going forward. In particular, the idea of adding incentives on the student side of things. What you've done under this proposal is to add incentives for students to get to degree quicker, and you are also providing the funding for the courses in order to facilitate that at the CSU. So I think in general, we are all on one page in terms of your plan and our plan, and I greatly appreciate the Senate's effort in this area. I know it's taken a long time for everybody to get to this point, but again, I want to pass along from the Chancellor significant gratitude for this plan that's before you today.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Morlock.
Mr. Storm, what was the last campus that was built by CSU system?
The last campus, I would have to say,
San Marcos?
I think it's probably Channel Islands.
Yeah.
Channel Islands. Right. I was thinking San Marcos. When was Channel Islands built?
I think it came into to the system. It was in the late 90s to early 2000s with the closing of the state hospital there in Camarillo.
Okay. When's the next one going to open?
Well, as of right now, we're really having a tough time addressing the issues that we have for our current campuses, in terms of just getting those courses that we need on our campus and that sort of thing. So we're not in a build mode; we're in a recovery mode, largely within the CSU at this point, trying to recover still from the recession and trying to offer all those courses we need for our students.
Okay, so then, do you have statistics? You give us 4-year graduation statistics. Do you have 5-year statistics? That I know we had a presentation, but the
Right.
narrative, are the numbers above 20%? I mean,
Oh yeah, they are. If we continue the conversation, I think I have something that's kind of handy. But it definitely one thing that I think that gets a lot of press largely is this notion that we have a poor four-year graduation rate. And it's unfortunate, I think, because a lot of that is by definition of how the federal government tracks what a four-year graduation rate is versus a six-year graduation rate. You saw that in that presentation earlier in the committees there. But generally speaking, we have a significant uptick in terms of students who are going, significant number of our students who have graduated within 5 years. I don't have it handy right
We
now.
were told that that compared somewhat relatively equal to other large systems in other states.
I think
And
it's-
I never was given that data, so
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out whether we help you recover or whether we shut you down.
And Senator Morlock, just to answer that question about the data and comparing to other institutions, we've made those comparisons looking at federal data. The post-secondary institutions around the country are required by federal law to report certain things, including graduation rates. We'd be glad to share that data with you.
Is it online, or if you could give me a hard copy, I'd love to see
We'd
that.
probably have to forward you a spreadsheet. It's a database, and you have to go
Okay.
in and make some requests. And who you decide defining the comparison institutions, can be open for discussion. So we'd be glad
Okay,
to share
consider
with
this
you.
a committee request, so we get data from the CSU and from the LAO in terms of 4, 5, 6-year graduation rates and how it compares nationally, and we'll move on, if that's okay?
No, I really want to tear Mr. Storm apart. Go ahead, I'm fine.